Good afternoon. We're Team Embargo North Korea, and I'll start by introducing ourselves. First, we have David Cornell, who's a third-year law student, who's a former recon Marine at the very tippy end of the point of the spear. We also have Francesca Genexi, who is an Italian lawyer here studying to get her Master of Law degree, who worked at Google previously. We have Anthony Reitel, who's a dual degree undergraduate in economics and computer science, who in his spare time advises the Prime Minister of Poland, as most of us do in our free time. And I'm Lieutenant John Price. I'm an active duty Navy lieutenant here studying in law to become a JAG, which I will be transitioning to in the fall. So as you can see, our problem that we originally posed might have been a little different than some of the others. It was very broad. And initially, we were looking at kind of the entire universe of how we could influence North Korea through sanctions enforcement to get them to change their behavior. At the end, as our video kind of concluded, we realized that the area that needs the most attention that's not getting today is the area of cryptocurrency. And so we'll present our journey and how we got there. We interviewed over 100 stakeholders from a variety, military, State Department, all sorts of government agencies, the private sector, academia and journalism. It was a smorgasbord of interviewees. We began by trying to map the problem. So it's such a big problem. We had a really hard time trying to really get to a specific place where we could touch it. So this was our very first shot at trying to figure out what's going on, where can we affect sanctions against North Korea, where can we make sure that they're really feeling the squeeze so that they're motivated to change in their behavior. And so we identified a couple main areas that North Korea was getting either resources or revenue, either by ship-to-ship transfers at sea, which we'll discuss in depth, but also these other things from the video, like criminal activity out of embassies, cybercrime, cryptocurrency mining, and then one of the big things that always exists is there's the Chinese crude oil pipeline and the Chinese border that we have little ability to touch. We also had to map what was going on the US side. So this was incredibly complicated from the outside also, not something we always got straight answers on, but there's a lot of different players. There's State Department, there's DOD, there's joint international partners, there's the UN, and then there's White House direction. A lot of these decisions get made at the NSC level in the White House, and they're not something that's getting made kind of lower down at other levels. So then our next step was to try to identify where these things are happening. And so the Office of Secretary of Defense, our sponsor, and the DOD in general is very focused on maritime ship-to-ship transfers as the key area where enforcement needs to be ratcheted up right now. But we also wanted to step back and notice that, the place where sanctions actually have effect is at the negotiations. So for our beginning of our journey, we really wanted to try to tie the two together. What is it about ship-to-ship transfers or any other aspect of sanctions enforcement that really gives us an advantage in negotiations between us and North Korea?
So we started where our sponsor was focused, which is in the maritime space, ship-to-ship transfers, where vessels will transfer at sea petroleum to North Korean vessels as a means of smuggling petroleum into North Korea. We are 3 lawyers, and so we were really hoping that this was going to be a legal problem. So the first thing we did was to map the approval process for when you wanted to interdict a ship, which requires flag state approval. We did a lot of work mapping this, only to be told this is not really a problem. So we took a couple more shots at the maritime space. First, we started creating an evasion wiki so that people in the State Department could know all the actors in the evasion space. We tried to make a less formal list like the one that the SDN list that OFAC creates. Then we talked to 2 ambassadors, and they told us, essentially, you need to start working for the negotiators, and marginal improvements in this space isn't really going to benefit anybody. So we realized that we were probably starting to work on more of a policy solution for sanctions enforcement rather than creating an actual tool, but we didn't quite want to pivot just yet, so we kind of bifurcated our problem. We took one more stab at trying to solve something in the maritime space. We talked to the PACOM J5, and he indicated that he could utilize a sort of predictive pattern of life map for everything that's going on in the East China Sea. We brought this MVP to a couple people. We're sort of told that we could have some middling benefit. Then we talked to more folks in the intelligence space, and we sort of realized that the limitations in maritime enforcement are more strategically motivated than they are based on our limitations in asset or intelligence. So this is a scientifically accurate map of our morale by the time we got to week 5.
This is not below the line.
So on week 5, with our morale pretty low, we had a conversation with our sponsor. Our sponsor said something that really struck us. Nothing on the sea matters if China opens up a pipeline. This got us to thinking. The problem here was that we could put pressure on traditional transport routes for North Korea, but this will be of a limited effect if North Korea actually implements new means and innovation to evade those sanctions. So we understood that up to this point, we had been solving the wrong problem. So we had to take a step back and try to look at a different angle in which we could tackle it. Throughout our research in the previous weeks, one of our focuses was to actually try and map out the actors that are involved in the enforcement of sanctions. We had conversation with a bunch of people from the OSD, OFAC, State Department, and so on. And all the people we talked to seemed to hint at an additional actor that everybody was working with, but they were sort of hesitant to give more details. We were committed to learning more about these actors, which is the one that you see in the big question mark. So we had the opportunity to talk to someone that had personal experience with the work of this actor, and we walked into that conversation with the goal of learning more about how this additional actor worked, but we walked out of that conversation with a lot more than we could have anticipated. In fact, we walked out with a new course of action. What this person told us was basically, if you were to work for me, what I would have you focus on is how North Korea is leveraging cyber tools to evade sanctions. This quote was probably one of the most important of our research because it started to inform our course of action going forward. This idea was also reinforced by a former Treasury official who said, yeah, the government is pretty slow to catch up on these things. So we liked this hint and we started gathering more information about it. And this is what we found. We were startled by the fact that maritime interdiction, which has basically been the main focus of enforcement in the past decade or so, actually deprives North Korea of about $750,000 per shipment of coal. And this is a problem that they've been working on for a decade or so. On the other hand, the problem that nobody is working on right now, so the theft of cryptocurrency, is able to generate up to $7 million per theft, per hacking for North Korea. So looking at these numbers, it was pretty clear to us where our next course of action was going to be. We finally identified a problem that we could touch, and it was only going to grow in the future, so we decided to delve deep into cryptocurrency.
Right, so at this point, we identified that there was a problem that was working in the past. We're working on it. And there's also a problem which we will have to be working on in the future. And also, there's this other problem is the one that generates immensely more value. So it's, as you see, week 7. Everyone's talking about deployment, procurement, and acquisition. And we're back to the drawing board discussing how North Korea generates cryptocurrency revenue. Interestingly, on this drawing board, what appeared is effectively what North Korea wants is to get from this point to the other point. So there is money in exchanges, and they want to exchange this money they've stolen towards fiat currency or hard currency. Of course, as we probably all know, most cryptocurrency money on the planet is generated in Bitcoin. There's, however, one problem for Bitcoin covert operations. It's pretty easy to track. It's what they call pseudo-anonymous coin, which basically means that with an application of enough tools which are already at the disposal of some of the US agencies, we're capable of tackling crime based in Bitcoin. This is why North Korean entities employ another layer on this model, which is they use other coins, such as Monero, Zcash, other coins that are considered a bit more private, which have better inbuilt encryptions and allow hostile actors to move in a bit more anonymous space. However, they have to go back, exchange to Bitcoin again, and then convert Bitcoin to hard currency. So we got this on the drawing board. We decided that we're not pivoting again. We don't have enough time. We have to validate this with someone. So we talked to the former National Security Advisor, General H.R. McMaster, over at Hoover, who told us that, basically, if you manage to get a better grasp on this and let us know how we could use our tools that currently at our disposal to tackle this issue, we could probably be actually a major game changer. So this motivated us a lot, but what motivated us even more was that he later said this, which definitely meant that we're up to something. A bit of what we decided to come up with is we basically decided to kind of split our thinking into two pathways, as we didn't have enough time to commit to one. One was on the more institutional/policy side, which was to utilize tools which already know from the physical space, such as blacklists, whitelists, enforcement of better security practices, and other kind of institutional measures to make sure that there are less sources for the North Korean rogue actors to gain currency from. And on the other hand, we also wanted to address more technical side, kind of inherent to the cryptocurrency model in itself, with areas such as tracking, permanent freezes, and all those temporary freezes, and all those other mechanisms which you could use to exert maximum pressure for a very specific period whenever negotiations require this, and there's a political willingness to commit additional assets. And with all those solutions, we decided, well, we have to do something with it now.
So we actually had a whole menu of kind of solutions we've kind of come up with, and now our question is how to present it going forward. So this is the stage we're at now. We've drafted a white paper that we're still kind of refining that we're going to be circulating. We also just found out yesterday we're in negotiations. It looks like we might be able to get published on War on the Rocks. If it doesn't work there, we might look to another blog or two. But just as a way to kind of this presentation's a little bit slim, but to give a fuller picture of kind of the solutions that we think might be worth pursuing. And we couldn't have done any of this without the teaching team, our sponsors, our mentors, our teaching assistants. So we want to thank all of them. And that was it. Thank you.